should say that I am John Forren. I'm with the Wenonah American Legion. I have some members here tonight, fellow veterans who will fact check me. In fact, Ralph, I see it back there, Vietnam vet. If I say anything untoward, he's going to stand up and give me the what for. So, and a few others. So feel free, Ralph, to fact check. But I wanted to mention that, because Vicki wanted me to, she asked for this information, so I'll share it with you. I was 3 years active duty in the Army. It was during Vietnam. Pardon me. 1971, even though I look like I'm 30. Yeah, you're supposed to feed that. So I was actually going to school at Marshall University when the plane crash killed the football team, the coaches, the cheerleaders. It was awful. I was not ready for college. I was going to school there in a student affirmation. In fact, I came from a low-income family. Thank you. So I was going to school on what was called BEOG grants, or Basic Educational Opportunity Grants. I completely wasted taxpayer dollars. So my student affirmation was changed to 1A. And I figured I was going to Vietnam. So back then, if you joined, you had to commit to 3 years. If you got drafted, it was only 2. But if you got drafted, you didn't get to pick your MOS, your military occupational specialty. But if you joined for 3 years and you got to pick your MOS, but it had to be a combat MOS. So it had to be artillery, infantry, or armor. And I thought, if I'm going to Vietnam, I'm going to be in a tank. And so that's what I signed up for. And then they proceeded to show me how easy it was to blow up a tank. And it was too late. So I was in tanks, but then they realized that my brilliant mind made me an MP afterwards. So anyway, that's a little history for you. Let me jump into this. So I'm calling this the perspectives of the U.S. focusing on the United States military and warfare. So, oh, that's not what I had I had an outline, so maybe this is it. So anyway, why should we give a damn, frankly, about the history of warfare? Well, one of the reasons is because we are where we are today because of warfare. And I'll explain that to you in a second. I'm almost stating the obvious. But we're going to talk about those who bear the brunt of the war. There are many, of course, who realize benefits of war. But of course, there are many who suffer the brunt of war. And of course, those are the combatants. But also the local citizenry. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the military today. If you've attended my July 4th presentations, you've heard me touch on a little bit of that. I think it bears repeating, especially in the context of what's going on today. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And also, feel free to jump in with any questions, or if you would like to share your own experiences. I would imagine that many of you here do have experiences you wouldn't mind sharing. Feel free to do that. I don't own the floor, so feel free to jump in and raise your hand. All right. They say warfare is the second oldest profession. We all know what the first one is. But I found this remarkable, this fact here, that there was organized warfare centuries before written language. So I would imagine that, Neanderthal would probably fight with another one, but they're talking about organized warfare. So I found that fascinating. This is the part, obviously, we wouldn't be the United States were it not for warfare. A lot of countries countries would not be the countries they are. And frankly, as a result of warfare, a lot of countries no longer exist because of warfare. This is another important reason why we would need to consider the history of warfare. Not everyone, of course, who wanted war were able to realize their wishes because they ended up in war. So Woodrow Wilson, classic example, you know what a number of things that resulted in the United States entering World War I, sinking of the Lusitania, the interception of a communique decrypted from Germany to Mexico against the United States. Neville Chamberlain, I don't know if you remember that he, of course he was the British Prime Minister at the time, went to see Hitler, got him to sign a document. It was the Munich Treaty that basically gave away the Sudetenland, thinking that that would satisfy Hitler. Of course, it did not. And Neville Chamberlain came back and said, wait in that signed document that we will realize peace in our time. And we know the fallacy of that. Same way with FDR. All these folks wanted peace, but war was thrust on them. So we damn sure better be ready for it. Speak softly and carry a big stick, of course, because you never know. As well-intentioned as our leaders have been. Speaking of leaders, another reason why we should consider history of war, many of our leaders have never been in the military. And you see some of them here. Putin claims to have been in the military. And of course he was in the KGB. He claims that he was a lieutenant in the artillery unit. But shockingly, no evidence to that effect exists, or that he's not produced anything like that. But Xi Jinping, the leader of the Communist China, was in the military. So why is that important? Because they need some context, and so do voters. Many voters, the majority of voters in our country have never served, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And of late, they elect leaders who also have never served. And so having that historical context of what war is, what it means, what it can do to the combatants and the local citizenry is absolutely important. And that's my point here. Can you all see that? For those of you in the back, it basically says this understanding or lack of the understanding affects their ability to prevent, start, fight, and end wars. So leaders can learn from this. So let's just turn our attention a bit to some pivotal battles. And you can't overemphasize the term pivotal here, because some of these battles, the outcome could have gone either way, and could have changed the course of history, could have changed the course of a country, or countries, plural. The Battle of Gettysburg, for example, pivotal, could have changed completely the outcome of the Civil War. We could have a North and a South, Confederate States of America. So these three are pivotal battles in World War I. Notice the dates, 1914, 1916, 1916. Anything strikes you about those dates? I'm sorry?
World War I.
Yeah, World War I. But it was also prior to the entry of the United States. The U.S. didn't enter the war until 1917. And so, and you probably, if you are a student of history, you probably know why we entered the war. Again, a communique, intercepted, Lusitania, in the United States. By the way, there were 125 U.S. citizens aboard the Lusitania. And so that happened 2 years prior to the United States entering the war. So a lot was going on. German U-boats were sinking a lot of ships, including ships, despite their claim, and I guess history has actually verified some of their claims, but they claim that some of these passenger ships were carrying arms and material. Evidently, in some cases, they were. So some pivotal battles in World War II. Battle of Stalingrad. And I'm sure you've heard of that one. An unbelievable number of casualties in that one. And when you think about the Battle of Stalingrad, the only reason that Hitler had his troops pivot to head to Stalingrad was simply because of the name of the city. And his disdain for Stalin was so great, it held little military value. But he turned his sights to Stalingrad, and that was pivotal. We know that why it was pivotal, because the Russians turned them back. Midway. I know that, well, some of you may have seen the movie. There's actually a couple different movies on Midway. Some great books, factual books on Midway. A lot turned on that battle, and of course, a lot happened to help the United States prevail in that battle, including decrypting and decoding Japanese radio transmissions. And so they were able to, with their intelligence unit, figure out that they were talking about Midway. But even knowing that the Japanese were going to attack Midway, and with the preparations the United States realized were part of that attack, they still had difficulty overcoming the Japanese in that battle. But easily could have gone the other way. We all know about Normandy. If you think about that, and I know many of you know that in Normandy, there was a secret campaign, all the things that had to be in place to make this work. There was a secret campaign to fool Hitler to thinking that the invasion was going to come at Calais. They had a ghost army. Inflatable tanks, inflatable trucks. So these aerial photographs show this massing of troops, and it just so happened George Patton slapping a couple of soldiers because of PSTD, post-traumatic PTSD. Little dislike there, which we recognize now as a real thing, was relieved of his command, and the Germans were so convinced that they would never stand down a general like that who kicked ass so convincingly, that they believed that it was Patton who was going to lead the invasion into Calais. Hitler was asleep when the invasion happened, and his officers were afraid to wake him up. Even as the troops were landing, the Allied troops were landing on Normandy, it's just amazing that think of how many thousands of people actually knew that secret. Somehow it did get to the Gestapo or Hitler. I mean, of course, the whole beaches were well reinforced anyway, but God, can you imagine if they got word of that and were more prepared for that invasion? The United States and the Allies would have been completely ripped to shreds. I mean, it could have been completely different. So I wanted to throw this up here because, sometimes we think of war in the abstract, but when you think, you look at these numbers, gosh, 53,000, more than 53,000 died in World War I. These are combat deaths. 405,000 World War II, 37,000 Korea, over 58,000 Vietnam. Every one of those people had families. Anyway, I just wanted you to dwell on the numbers for a moment. Civilians, can you imagine if any of those wars took place in the continental U.S.? So we actually had Japanese troops in Alaska. The only time that any Axis power was on U.S. soil, out in the Aleutians. But can you imagine if we had any of you experiencing these wars here in the U.S.? Look at these civilian deaths. So World War I, the estimates were pretty darn wide, 6 to 13 million. World War II, 50 to 55 million. Good God. These men, women, children, sons, daughters, fathers, mothers. So just turning our attention, I mentioned we were going to just touch briefly on today's U.S. military. I wanted to talk about this simply because, again, we have the most powerful military on the planet. China's catching up. So is Russia. But of the 331 million residents of the United States, only 1.3 million serve on active duty in the United States. That's less than 0.4%.
John, how many are also in the reserves?
So that does not count the reserves. That's a good point.
Do you have any idea of the number?
I don't with me. Who asked that question?
I did.
Oh, there it is. I apologize, I only have hearing in one ear, so I can't echocate. So I heard you, but...
Well, my grandson, who's in the New Jersey National Guard, has spent a year in Iraq 2 different times.
Yes, and that's an excellent point. I'm glad you raised that, because don't think that because one is in the National Guard, Air Guard, or the Army Guard, or one is in the Reserves, Army Reserves, Air Force Reserves, that you can't be called up. You absolutely can be. And one of the principal reasons is that for the reserves, that's national. You're still under the orders of the president. He's in this case, he. I hope one day we'll have a she program as a president, but the president can call up the Army Reserves anytime, Air Force Reserves. The Guard, however, the governor of each state is in charge of their guard units. That does not mean, however, if the president has need, they can't wrest control of those military forces from the state. But by and large, on a daily basis, it's the governor who controls. In fact, the governor of New York just deployed troops, guard troops, in the New York City subways to address the violence. The violence is just crazy. But anyway, so that's the military, and you're right, it does not include those numbers, and thank goodness that people do sign up for the Guard and Reserves, because they always term the reserves the ready reserves. That means they've been trained, yeah, they go to work. My daughter's in the Air Guard, and she has a regular job, but she is in cyber warfare, reports on weekends, gets deployed on occasion. Thank you, Chris, for allowing her to be deployed on several months. Evelyn's boss is here, so that's why I'm going to point him out. But same for the reserve, so thank goodness people do, and you're right, they're not part of this number. Veterans. So as you can imagine, then if only this small percentage actually serves, then of course the veterans, you would guess, are rather small too. And so only less than 7.5% have ever served in their life, including reserves and guard. So those are veterans too. So, oh gosh, I left that in here. This is an Army boot camp. That's how the Army does it, Ralph. So I want to just talk about the recruitment shortfalls. I don't know if you can see this. This is actually a brick that I bought out there. I'm going to talk about that here in a second, but really, we're having difficulties. The military is having difficulties getting people interested in serving in the military. And that goes for all branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And this is an example. The Army is congressionally authorized to have up to 500,000 active duty soldiers, male and female, but they can't meet that quote, nor can any of the other branches. And so I just wanted to chat a little bit about this, motivations to serve. So, I mentioned the sinking of Lusitania, of course, the attack on Pearl Harbor, 9/11. There was an upswelling of patriotism, volunteerism. People wanted to serve. They were clamoring to serve. No question about the motivation there. Most of the folks who volunteer, including yours truly, this is where this brick comes in. So, all the males in my family served in the military. Mostly, and I'll get to that in a second, but a lot of them volunteer for economic opportunities. Not my grandfather, well, he was a farmer in West Virginia, a subsistence farmer, but the draft actually was initiated in World War II. And so he was drafted, fought in the Argonne. My uncle, World War II, father, he joined in 45, just missed World War II. This is me, 71. My brother joined in 75. My other brother, we were Army all the way up to him. Even for some reason, he joined Navy. And then my daughter Evelyn was the smartest of them all and joined the Air Force route. So, and so I can see this metric here, this figure, 83% of volunteers come from families who have already served. So, think about that. It's just, when I was going to school at Marshall, I was in the ROTC program. As I mentioned, I was not ready for college. But when I got out, used the GI Bill, and I paid for most of my, well, all of my bachelor's, most of my master's. That's the economic benefit for a lot of people who serve in the military. And so for me, it worked out. I just, and for many of these, my brothers all end up going to college because of the military. But here's, I wanted you to focus in on this for a second, because one of the reasons that the United States cannot fulfill its quota in any of the branches is because, I mean, look at this. Only 23% of recruiting age men and women in this country even qualify to serve because of obesity and other drugs like issues, other issues like drugs and such. 23%. So that's alarming when you consider that these are young folks, ages 18 to, I think it was 26. Alarming. So I just want to touch on this too. You all have, I'm sure, thought about this. Today's U.S. military, you're hearing about drones all the time. Well, technology, you can bet your bottom dollar, technology is being studied by all the country's militaries. And so it's not just drones, but when you think about artificial intelligence, I mean, they're already using semi-autonomous robots in military situations. But think about the autonomous ones, the ones that are outfitted with artificial intelligence and actually process the idea of kill or no kill of a human being. Supposedly they're not out there, and supposedly there's sort of this understanding similar to something like the Geneva Convention, but are you kidding me? I guarantee you there are countries out there developing this stuff, and perhaps even the United States. But how scary is that? You know, if this country or the globe reaches that point of singularity where artificial intelligence takes over, that's kind of scary. Anyway, I don't want to leave you.
This is the most depressing. Right now, I think I'm switching groups.
All right, I just want to lighten it up.
John.
So here's how I'm going to lighten it up. So you probably can't see this map from way back there. This map, and it just came out today. This is hot off the press. This literally came out today. This map shows you the safest places in case of a nuclear war.
Can you say word?
Jersey doesn't seem to be Jersey.
No, you see all this stuff? I just see there's a lot of wine left over on this.
Not for long.
So, the reason I put this up here is yeah, we have to have a ready military, because our country is one of the good guys, and I'll just put it plainly and simply that way. But that doesn't mean, though, that we, all of us, should not elect leaders with some sense that they're going to keep us out of war. That doesn't mean that we have to capitulate on significant issues that bear on this country, but damn it, we shouldn't have leaders that are too willing to get us into a situation where there's no turning back. This sounds like I'm advocating for something. I'm really not. I'm just giving you, I'm hoping I'm just giving you a perspective on the military, especially for those of you who never served. Believe me, when you're in the military, you get a slice of Americana. And thank goodness we have folks who go to the service academies, for example, really bright minds, people who come out of there and serve our country well as officers in all the branches. All you need to do is go see some of these people in the service academies, and it will make you feel better. That these folks who will become our future leaders, both in the military and possibly as civilians. So I just want to leave you with that. Goodness, I didn't go on this long, but anyway, any questions at all?
So where should we move?
So, yes. So they base these on proximity to water, other sustenance, and weather. So you see Maine, even though it doesn't look like any bombs would be shot that way. But the weather, I think, mixes that. But there's a few places in Florida that might be open. So, but yeah, it looks like mostly out west. But that's not going to cause me to move. Anyway, any questions?
Can you go one slide back?
Sure.
Were any of those photos real, or did you pull them from like movies?
So these are real.
Really?
These actually are operating military, semi-autonomous military, we would call them dogs. This is real as well.
That scary.
Yeah, this insect-looking creature, this thing is actually from a movie. As is that. But, it's not too far-fetched to think that there's something that looks like this in one of the, hangars at Area 5 or Area 21. Yes, ma'am.
About the chart about the deaths, there was non-combat U.S. deaths. I'm just wondering where do they come from? I mean, almost like a lot of deaths in World War I that were non-combat.
Absolutely. So thank you for asking that question, because you probably, if you look at that, let me go back at that number, because it's actually a higher number than I think combat deaths, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason that is because of, there we go. So yeah, 64, that's what I thought, 64,000.
U.S. combatants, right?
Yes. So, yep, 64 non-combat related deaths as opposed to 53,000. And that's because of disease. The,
Spanish flu.
that's, who said that? Because that is exactly right. Barbara, you're exactly right. The Spanish flu during World War I killed scores of thousands and thousands.
But it came from the United States, correct? From a
No.
military base?
No, it came from overseas. It was brought back from the United States.
I heard it came
This is-
from somewhere in the United States.
No,
and
I
it went
think
over
it
there.
started in
That's a good question. That I don't know.
I
but
saw a ship
It was brought over from,
That's what I said.
Actually, no.
it was brought back.
They call it the
They,
Spanish
and it
flu,
didn't
right?
have anything to do with Spain.
No. There were a bunch of soldiers from the United States that didn't want to go to Spain.
I'll find out for you, Deb.
I saw that on a documentary.
Oh, okay, well, then you might be
Yeah,
right.
no, I saw it on a documentary, whether it's accurate or not. I don't
But in
know.
World War II.
It was Philadelphia, they got
I
hit
think
so
it was
bad.
Kentucky or somewhere, Oklahoma, the documentary said.
I'm sorry.
The plane was in
World War II.
Philadelphia.
Oh,
Training.
Well, there was
Yes.
a big
So-
parade there when somebody.
In World War II, there were a lot of
Yes.
combatants who froze to death, who died of dysentery, prisoners of war. So all those were considered non-combat deaths. Even though they were in a combat zone.
Right, but it wasn't,
I know
yeah.
7 veterans in the Wenonah Cemetery were killed in training.
Yes.
Pilots were, before radar, they would black out the cockpit, they used to
Yeah.
have fly plane, working on basic
Exactly right.
instruments.
Those 7 Marines in that Osprey that went down in a training exercise.
Other few recently.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
So we can put dates around most of the war times. Is there a date when the war on terrorism started? Just curious.
That's a great point because it almost blends in together with the Gulf War, which I think technically ended in 1991. And it was almost immediate. The Gulf War, the war on terrorism started. So the United States actually considers, the Congress establishes the membership criteria for the American Legion. And so we are tied to the standards they set for membership. Well, during the Trump administration, he passed what was called the Legion Act. It was let every, I forget what the G stood for, but there might be one. But there were conflicts like Grenada and Panama and a lot of places where the U.S. suffered casualties. And so this Legion Act was designed to recognize those folks who ended up serving in combat outside of the named wars. So Congress changed our membership criteria to now basically say that ever since December 7th, 1941, thank you. I'm supposed to know that stuff. The United States has been in a state of war. So now every person who's ever served in the military since that time is now eligible for American Legion membership. So if you aren't a member and you served any time during that time, please come see me because I want you as a member. Anything else? I hope I didn't depress you so much.